This is Lightning Power Lunch with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli on Lightning Radio.
We're adding two players that are going to play significant minutes for us, and two players that are highly competitive, have had success in postseason in the past, have elevated their game when it matters most. They're skilled. They can play 200-foot games. They can be used in all sorts of situations. So I also like the fact that Oliver is signed for next season. So it's not just the last 40 days of this season. Hopefully a nice long playoff run, but we also get to have him on our roster next season as well. Still early with Yanni. We just got him today, but I know how much he enjoyed his time here. He knows all the good we think of him. So I think it's realistic to hope that we're going to be able to extend him beyond this season as well. So it's a trade where we're getting, I think, better today, better tomorrow, and if we can keep Yanni, maybe even more better, if you understand that going forward as well. So.
Yeah, it's not true, but we'll get into we'll get into the nuts and bolts. Did anything happen yesterday? My goodness, kind of gets me fired up, partner, to talk about.
Well, it
the Lightning.
Probably is going to mean that Friday is not going to be an overly busy day for the Tampa Bay Lightning. But Julian said, "Never say never." They don't have a lot of cap room left, and they had to do some finagling to get this deal done to get both players in.
So what you're saying is
we can get into the deal and kind of how it came together, what the Lightning gave up. There was a third team that was involved and all of that. But at the end of the day, the end of yesterday, Greg, and as we look forward to today and then tonight's game, what Julian said is true. The Lightning are a better team today than they were at this time yesterday. And we have been, I'll use this word, speculating, but it turned out that we were on target, speculating that the Lightning were going to target forward depth. We'll use that word, depth.
That's why you got to listen to this show.
Yes.
All right?
Julian
got to listen to it.
Must have taken our advice. No, Julian didn't need our advice.
No, he has his own analytics.
But the Lightning did address that. So they probably added two players. If you had asked me a week ago, 3 days ago, are the Lightning going to be able to add over $10 million in salary? If you add Gourde's salary and Bjorkstrand's salary together, I would say I would be surprised if they'd been able to make that work because they couldn't just add the players. They needed to. Right. They didn't have that much cap space. So I thought it would be more likely to maybe add one player in that $5 million range and maybe somebody making half that, or several players making less than that. Mm-hmm. But they were able to make it work to get both players, and both players will help the Lightning. Bjorkstrand's under contract, too, for another year. And Julian said his hope, his intention, his objective is to try and get Yanni Gourde re-signed when the cap is going up.
Yeah, and it's interesting. There's a lot to get into, but it's interesting the line combinations today.
Yeah.
Gensel, Point, Kucherov. Nothing changes there. Hagel, Cirelli, Paul. So they like Paul on that second line because we had talked about is he best served to be a third line center. So the Lightning say, okay, at least initially it's going to go left to right, Gonsalves, Gourde, Bjorkstrand. Mm-hmm. Then Gergensons, Glendening, Chaffee.
So a couple things right off the bat. As much as they like Nick Paul maybe being the third-line center, now they have a third-line center. Yanni Gourde was their third-line center. I'm not saying that Nick Paul will stay with Hagel and Cirelli, but there's a lot to like about having Yanni Gourde as your third-line center. I would be surprised if we don't see Oliver Bjorkstrand at some point playing with Hagel and Cirelli. He's a right-handed right winger. He can score. This guy is a shooter.
Yeah.
He has scored against the Lightning. We have seen it less in Seattle, but certainly during his time in Columbus. And I'm not shocked that he's not starting with those guys because, he's coming to a new team. It's the first time he's ever been traded in season. The only other time he was traded from Columbus to Seattle, and that was during the 2022 offseason. And Coop was asked this morning if Gourde and Bjorkstrand have played together before, and he said not often, but they did play together in the playoffs when Seattle got into the playoffs. So, and there's familiarity there because they've been teammates the last few years. So I think starting out, we know Nick Paul can play with Cirelli and Hagel, and they're being, I'll use this word, cautious with Bjorkstrand in that they don't want to throw too much at this guy right off the bat. So start him in the third line. Let's see how it goes. He's starting in the second power play unit. Again, I would be very surprised if we don't see Oliver Bjorkstrand at some point on that top unit as a righty shot. Is he going to go to the Stamkos spot? I don't know. When we talk about Bjorkstrand's shot, what I remember of the shot is it's a lethal wrist shot. I don't actually remember him bombing one-timers, but I haven't seen the guy play as much as certainly the scouts have, and probably
does he have a better wrist shot than Nick Paul? So good. That's a good question.
Yeah,
both
I
of
think
those
Nick
guys
Paul's,
can fire it.
Nick Paul's wrist shot is heavier. Bjorkstrand is like a BB gun shooting the puck. It's like whoop, and he can pick the corners too, which he has done from tough angles. He's a righty who can score from almost the bottom of the right faceoff circle and put it into the upper corner. I've seen him score from there before.
For sure.
He's been a regular 20-goal scorer in the NHL throughout his career. Beginning of career, middle of his career. More recently, he's at 16 goals this year, and we still have, 20-some-odd games left, playing for a non-playoff team. So, I mean, he's even scored 20-plus goals playing for Seattle when Seattle was missing the playoffs. I mean, Seattle's only made the playoffs once to this point. So, when you ask me, like, what do you make of this? You know Nick Paul can play in the second line. But I think that the acquisition of Bjorkstrand opens up the possibility that they're going to experiment and see if he is a fit. Because if he is a fit, you can move Nick Paul onto the third line to maybe play with Yanni Gourde. Nick Paul can play wing. He's playing wing tonight with Cirelli and Hagel. And the other part, too, like if that is going to be kind of your shutdown, if you're going to look at the Yanni Gourde line, however it's configured, to be, if not the shutdown line, a matchup line, it doesn't hurt to have two guys who can take faceoffs on that line.
Sure.
Right? I mean, you'd be pulling Paul off the Hagel-Cirelli line. You'd only have one guy who can take faceoffs on that line, Cirelli. But anyway, I think right now what the Lightning are doing heading into this game makes sense. Mm-hmm. But as we get farther into March and Bjorkstrand gets acclimated to his new team, new system, new coaches, new teammates, look for him to get an opportunity to play in the top six. Look for him to get an opportunity to play in the number one power play. That's my guess.
Yeah,
we'll
and I
see
think
if
that's
it plays
fair.
Out.
By the way, who increased their stock the most over the last month? Gage Gonsalves. He finds himself not only sticking with the team, but potentially being on a third line. And you see the trickle-down effect. If I would have told you that fourth line now is going to be the combination that it is today, you'd say that's a little more effective. Or maybe that's about where it needs to be. Chafee gives it a little juice.
Yeah.
Gergensons.
And they've been a line. It was more at the start of the year that Chafee was with those guys. But look, Gergensons was moved up in the lineup in part because he was playing really well. But also in part, I think, because the Lightning were like, okay, we kind of need to fill a spot here.
Right.
Now that they've added Gourde and Bjorkstrand, Gergensons goes back to playing with Glendening, his penalty kill partner.
Yep.
And they have chemistry.
And go hit everything you see. Chafee's got speed. Go hit everything you can see and keep that puck in the other team's end. A couple of things to take from this trade, and I want to get to our audience as well, partner, for this, because there is a game tonight, Buffalo. We can discuss that a little bit. Vasi will be starting at Bolts Radio.
And we're also going to be playing Yanni Gourde's press conference from this morning.
A couple of minutes of that, for sure.
Whenever you decide to cue it up.
Yeah, whenever. It might not be. It might be after the show. whenever we want to. We're going to have so much to say.
Go find it on the YouTube channel, Lightning
That's
fans.
Right. That's right. So a couple of things I think confirmed. One, our spidey sense about where this team needed to upgrade was confirmed by Julian. Not only did he get one guy, got two. What do you get in those players? I think familiarity, but guys who can play. And he hinted at Gourde potentially maybe signing beyond this season. So maybe you're getting some term with these players. Bjorkstrand, again, not an old guy. Not a 22-year-old.
He turns 30 in April.
He's in the prime.
He's in the prime of his career.
You get him for another year, and then from there, let's see what happens. But a couple of things we can take from Julian, and there's a track record here. Willing willing. Would you say this was a relatively big trade? I'd say it was pretty big considering what you gave up too. Draft picks, they are what they are to the Lightning. They use them to acquire talent. Get another team to come in, hopefully, and pay a little bit of salary here and there. You're not sacrificing prospects. To me, that was another big part of this whole thing. I mean, look at your high-end prospects who you are starting to build. You still have them. You did not have. You gave up Mikey Eyssimont. Oh, look, Eyssimont did some good things.
Who is up after this year.
Yeah, did some good things. But you know what? Give me those two players over an Eyssimont, and let's move forward. So Julian, showing the ability to go big, does not mind parting ways with draft picks, which I think is the correct move. Cost control, hopefully, even with Gourde. This isn't just a rental. You really got to like that. And I think just the ability to be aggressive. And he's done it basically every year except one.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't be surprised. And I will not be surprised. As long as he's the general manager, that this guy, as long as he feels that window is open, he's going to make a move. And let's face it, I think the Lightning's play, not only at the beginning of the year when maybe metrically they were better than what the record was indicating, but where they are now, confirmed to him he needed to do something to help this group, because I think he's seeing what we're seeing. The East is open. It's wide open. Why not the Lightning? And if I can shore up the one aspect of this team that maybe needs help, as a general manager, control what I can control, I did. And now it's up to the players to go make their move. But I think if you're a Lightning fan, forget about the draft picks. You can't worry about things that are the unknown. Worry about what you have, because this is about winning today. And Julian Breezewell has had that mindset, partner, as long as he's been GM. That organization has that mindset. It's time to win now. And again, you didn't have to give up Howard, Duke, Crozier, Lilleberg, any of those guys that might be on the radar for another team, because what you're seeing too, it is a seller's market. Some of the asks, what you're reading out there, have been astronomical. To do what he did to get the players that he got, I'm okay giving up a couple of first-round picks. What do they mean?
Yeah. Well, let me address that. I actually want to address two items of this deal that may raise some red flags for the Lightning fans who are looking for flags. And one of them I brought up. I'll get to the draft picks, because that's what the Lightning gave up is one of the flags, right? It's like, oh my gosh, the pool of prospects, they haven't had a first-round pick in how many years other than Isaac Howard, or that's still in the organization. What are they going to do without two more first-round picks in 2026 and 2027? One from each of those years.
Correct.
I'll get to that. The first red flag, though, is the status of Yanni Gourde, because I was very clear and consistent on the show saying, I don't know what you're going to get with Yanni Gourde, because he's been out. His last game before he pulled himself out of the lineup, so I think he was dealing with the effects of the sports hernia injury, and sometimes guys try and just play through it and kind of, when I say rehab, they're like trying to treat it while they're playing, and then eventually, if they go to surgery, they're like, this isn't working. So his last game was January 2nd. He had the surgery. He hadn't played since.
Right.
To me, that was a little bit of a caution flashing light. Like, is he fully recovered? Is he going to be able to play at the level that, you want him to play at when he returns from the surgery? And sometimes, as I've mentioned, not always, but sometimes players have the surgery and there's something not quite right, and they have to have a second procedure. Doesn't mean that their career is over. It just means that the recovery is longer than originally expected. And, we don't have a lot of runway left in the season, right? They got Yanni Gourde for this season. They'd like to re-sign him, but the point is for this season. So I think a couple of things happened. First of all, Julian said, we got the medical report before we made the trade. But he's like, also, he played. He got a game in. He played for Seattle on Tuesday, and he said he looked fine. So I think that those two elements kind of assuaged any concerns that the Lightning had about reacquiring him. The other part of the Yanni Gourde acquisition, which I think Eric actually asked Julian this question at Julian's press conference yesterday. Lightning fans are used to seeing the Yanni Gourde of the 2010s into the 2020s, when he was under 30, basically. Right. This Yanni Gourde is 33. He is not 36, but how much of the same Yanni Gourde are we getting? And Julian said, you look for quickness, you look for tenacity. Like, what starts to deteriorate as you get older? Kind of reflexes, your quickness.
Everything.
And he's like, yeah, everything. But, I mean, what is the biggest strength of Yanni Gourde? I mean, the two biggest strengths, I think, his speed and his relentlessness. Yes. I mean, you don't really lose your relentlessness, but if you can't get there, it's hard to be relentless, right?
Yeah, right.
And so Julian's like, we've scouted him. He's like, he is just as quick as he was. I mean, I don't know how long that's going to continue. It's kind of like the questions that at some point McDonough is going to have to answer, and the Lightning have to answer about McDonough.
Sure.
McDonough at 35 looks as good as he did during his first time with the Lightning. But eventually, like, Father Time is undefeated, right? So at some point, players start to slow down. It has not happened with Ryan McDonough, and the Lightning are confident that it has not happened with Yanni Gourde. At least, they're getting basically the same guy that they reluctantly parted ways with when Seattle took him in the expansion draft. You can only protect so many players. Lightning had to leave certain guys unprotected. Seattle wanted Yanni Gourde. That's why he left. It's not like the Lightning traded him. It's not like they didn't re-sign him. They wanted him. But they had to protect the top guys, right? They had to protect Kucherov. They had to protect Point, protect Stamkos. Like, they couldn't protect everyone. The rules were tougher for the existing teams in the Seattle expansion draft.
Right.
So Yanni Gourde was taken. I think Seattle was glad that they got him. So the one red flag was about Gourde. We'll see. Hopefully he stays healthy the rest of the year. Hopefully he's able to play just as he played with the Lightning the first time around. The second part are these draft picks. So what the Lightning had to do, they had to pay more in what went back to Seattle because they had to have two teams take 75% of Gourde's salary. So because Detroit got involved to take, I think it's 25%, and Seattle was retaining 50%, that meant that the price tag went up. So really the price tag, 2 firsts and a second. Now, the Lightning have 2 second-round picks this upcoming draft. They don't have a first, but they had 2 seconds. One of the seconds they got in the Sergachev trade, which was originally Toronto's draft pick. That's going to be a bottom of the round pick because Toronto's going to make the playoffs. So they still have a second-round pick. It's the 2 firsts. They are lottery protected. So should the Lightning miss the playoffs in 2026, that summer, or 2027, and be in a position to get a top 10 pick, they get to keep the pick. And then they have to pay in some other way. Mm-hmm. If not, presumably, they make the playoffs. You're looking at a middle to bottom of the first round pick. What is the value of that pick? Sometimes there's great value in a player taken 20th. Sometimes there's not. And Julian said, there's a huge difference between a guy taken at the top of the first round and a guy taken 32nd. Also, as Julian has said, he said this not just this year, but previous years. You draft a player at 18, particularly if that player is, let's say, middle of the first round to the bottom of the first round. You are, first of all, going to be waiting several years until you see that player in the NHL, if you see that player at all in the NHL. And there's no guarantee that that player is going to play to the level of a first-round pick, however you value that in your head. And the reason for that is there's a lot of unknown. From the time a player is taken at 18, unless you're Sidney Crosby, unless you're Alex Ovechkin, unless you're Connor McDavid. That's why there's a difference between the guys at the top of the draft. Sure. Connor Bedard, take your pick. Celebrini. These guys are superstars. But a guy who's taken 22nd in the first round might turn into a great NHLer. Might not. So in Julian's thinking, he's like, we can restock our prospect pool in ways other than just having the first round picks down the road. And I think he's done that. We mentioned, he got Geekie. He got Moser. They've gotten Hagel. They have Howard, right? They found Lilleberg. Lilleberg was drafted by Arizona, and they decided to walk away from him. Lightning grabbed him as a free agent. He's at the beginning of his career. So there's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say. And I think the Lightning have been very nimble in finding other ways to get younger players without having the first-round draft picks. But they needed to give something back to get these two players for now. And for Lightning fans who are like, I really wish they would have not traded first-round picks, I think the Lightning are looking at it as these are not going to be high first-round picks. And if something goes haywire and we miss the playoffs and we get a top 10 pick, we're keeping the pick. So
it's a calculated gamble, but one worth taking.
Yeah, and it's worked before for the Lightning.
For sure. I mean, how many draft picks, partner, let's say 15 and down, make it to the NHL that first year?
Well,
they
the
step
first
right
year,
into camp.
very few.
Very few.
Very few.
Right.
Eventually, I think a fair number. But, what does that player become?
Yep.
I mean, we are excited about Isaac Howard. Isaac Howard was a first-round pick near the end of the first round. Not every first-round pick who goes to college gets into the Hobie Baker discussion. Sure. Isaac Howard has. That's a credit to him. But we still have to wait and see how Isaac Howard adjusts to the pro game and to the NHL game, potentially. So it's still an unknown, and we're a couple of years past his draft year.
Yeah. You mentioned Yanni Gourde. I think this might be a good time. Let's play a little bit of Yanni Gourde here, and then let's get into some questions. But Yanni Gourde had a chance to speak to the media earlier today. Why don't we give that a listen to it on the show here?
Felt great. A lot of fun. Very exciting. It was good to be back.
Watching you step on the ice, you're smiling like ear to ear. Just what emotions did you feel?
Yeah, like I said, lots of excitement. It's so good to be back here and be in that the Bolts jersey and seeing the guys and seeing everyone. Super excited for the opportunity and can't wait for tonight.
I know you didn't want to leave, right, when the expansion draft happened. Did you ever think that a return might be in the cards at any point? Obviously always you always let your mind wonder if it could be possible. But this is awesome, and I'm so excited to be back. And it was my time in Seattle was great. It was a lot of fun, and again, I'm super excited to join this team and win some games. A lot of different faces in that room from when you left, for sure. But in terms of the familiarity walking back into the building and everything like that, I mean, it all kind of come rushing back.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of new guys, but it's the same thing walking in, and like I said, it's very familiar, feels surreal. A lot of excitement, and can't wait to get going tonight.
Yanni, how much do you think that familiarity will help you, once you get on the ice?
I think system-wise, it's pretty similar to what I used to play when I was here. So that should definitely help. And then once you go on the ice, it's you play hockey and you give it your all, and every single shift. And that's the plan tonight, and it's great to be back.
What kind of player are the Lightning getting in Bjorkstrand after playing with him?
Yeah, he's a great player. He's got a tremendous shot. He's relentless. He's a great player, and it's been a lot of fun playing with him. I was on the line with him a lot throughout my my stay in Seattle, and yeah, I'm super excited to join the Bolts with him.
Man, it feels like we never left Yanni Gourde.
We've left the screen though.
That was pretty cool. I just see blue.
Yeah,
that's okay though.
I'm looking at Steve's computer, and I see us, but I don't see us on the on my computer.
Can't see us, but you know what though? Nobody cares.
Yeah, maybe Steve. Do you have to let us in? I see myself in backstage. Have you let us back in, Steve? All right. Well,
Steve says.
Hopefully you can see us, folks. I don't see Greg. I don't see me. Now, John Cooper said in his press conference that Bjorkstrand and Gourde play together in the playoffs, unless I misheard him, and he said they didn't play a lot together during the regular season, but Yanni would know, and Yanni said that they have. So I'm going to reboot. Maybe that's going to do the trick for me.
There you go. I see you.
I mean, I'm still on the air, but...
Can you see me? I see you now.
I'm about to re-enter studio. Yeah, there we are.
There you go. Perfect.
The fans are like, who are watching on the stream, these guys have no idea what they're talking about. They're technologically... They qualify as doofuses technologically. What's the plural of doofus? Is it doofus is or like doofi?
Idiots?
Yeah, okay. I'll just say that. Stella got so annoyed with me that she got up and like jostled the camera too.
Yeah, well,
she was here this morning. She got to meet
Did she ask a question?
The Sabres broadcasters.
Nice.
I was chatting with Dan and Rob Ray, who do the Sabres. Tonight's an ESPN game, so they're on radio. They simulcast in Buffalo, but they were both gushing over Stella. And then Henry Jokiharju came out. I never met him before, but he came out and he's like, "What a great dog!" So Stella's just a lover.
There
she doesn't care. Like you could play for the Lightning, you could play for the Sabres,
she's an icebreaker.
You could play for the Swedish national team. She doesn't care. She just somebody pet me.
And that's all they
Anyway, it is clear that Yanni Gourde is very excited about being back.
Rejuvenated, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes back to, and we'll get to some questions here too, being injured, his play, maybe been up and down. There is something to be said for being rejuvenated, that bump. We see it all the times when a coach is fired. That initial surge when a new coach takes over, there's an energy around the team. I think for an individual player that gets moved, particularly to one who's playing very well, a place where you've won championships, I think you can play off of that for a while. I'm not going to say it's going to turn Yanni Gourde into a 25-goal scorer, but I think I would be surprised. He has been, but like not recently, and I think he is somebody that could maybe get back to that level for a period of time, riding this wave of momentum, because I'm sure he's looking at it like, I never thought this would happen.
Yeah.
And now I'm back at a place I've had the best success in my career. And, there's still a few guys left over from the Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
And so I think from that perspective, it's fun. Sean on Facebook says, my kids weren't happy when I told them Mikey was gone. Mm-hmm. He was their favorite scrappy fighter, and they made a sign for him they have to redo now. We're going to go to the game Tuesday in Carolina. But I love the trade. And I can't wait to see them in action. Maybe I'll tell them to make a sign for Dave. Radio guys always get left out.
Well, I appreciate that, Sean. Although on radio we don't have the cameras, except on this show, which is kind of radio and video, so we don't get to show the signs.
Make a
like
sign.
They do on TV.
Make a radio sign.
So look, AC Mont gave the Lightning good minutes, and Coop had some nice things to say about him. I think the Lightning were able to upgrade though. Like, would their lineup be even better had they had AC Mont with Gourde and Bjorkstrand? Yeah. I mean, I would love to have had all three, but you got to give something up, right?
Sure.
He's on an expiring contract, too. There's no guarantee that he was going to re-sign with the Lightning or the Lightning were going to, be able to keep him based on what else they want to do.
Yeah.
So I think it's more that comment from Sean in terms of Lightning Nation, Bolts Nation writ large. I think the regret is probably going to be more about the draft picks than AC Mont. That's my guess. I haven't seen a lot of the comments though, and you can tell me if, maybe people are just like, great trade. And
I think
we're not too concerned about it.
I will tell you this on X, and it wasn't necessarily from Lightning fans. It's just in your feed. You get to see a lot of hockey reaction to the trades coming in. I think it's always with the Lightning. It's about the draft picks that were given up. I can't believe they gave up that much to get Goudreau. I can't believe they gave that to get Gourde and Bjorkstrand. And I think for people who have been in this, who have covered the team, I think you yawn at that and say, well, okay, you're gonna fret over draft picks. The thing about it is that people, they don't. I told you this before. I think a lot of people look at minor leagues and prospects and think of the best case scenario. You're giving away draft picks. Well, that means the Lightning's farm system is going to go from 22 to 30. And now they're not going to be competitive, when in reality, how many times have the Lightning used other people's young players? They've drafted them, they've developed them, and then the Lightning, because maybe they don't have their own first-round pick that they've developed over the last couple of years, are able to pluck somebody else, and it's essentially the same thing. In fact, probably greater value.
They're farther along.
And that's just kind of
Connor Geeky.
Yeah, I mean,
Hagel is the prime example.
Oh man,
I mean, it's hard to find a better example than that. But if you want to say like Connor Geeky, the Lightning got him 2 years after he was drafted. So,
but you're right about Hagel. You're right about how about Paul?
Yep.
I mean, these guys are playing their best hockey with the Lightning while somebody else basically drafted and, quote-unquote, developed them early on.
So I never shared this with you, but Monday before the game, we had Doug Plagans on with us during the show on Monday. But before the game, he and I were chatting, and we were kind of talking about the trade deadline. You know, they had just acquired Seth Jones. And he's like, you know, the people, because he hears it too. It's like, oh my gosh, you're trading all of these draft picks.
Yeah.
He's like, look at the last 4 Cup winners in order: Lightning, Colorado, Vegas, Florida. He's like, what do these 4 teams have in common in terms of how their general managers approach things? They are super aggressive, and they are not caught up in holding on to draft picks.
Sure.
And I think that's fair. I mean, look at how those organizations have operated. They've been bold in making moves. And sometimes they don't just give up, draft picks. Sometimes they give up pretty good players.
Why stop at
on their
4
teams.
years ago? Go back to 2016. Go back to 2017. Because the Penguins and Capitals had the same philosophy. We know the Lightning did back-to-back Cup years. Aggressive.
Yeah.
Draft picks be damned. Look, eventually does it catch up with you? Yeah, but so what? Are you playing for best minor league system, or are you playing to win the cup? Your window is only open so many times. The Lightning have, you know what they did? They've actually opened it up a little bit more.
Yeah.
They really have. It's closing for some. The Lightning, I mean, this is what's fascinating. The last 10 years, they've actually been able to keep it pretty level, and on some seasons, kind of lift it up a little bit.
I'm going to use this just as a point of comparison. It's not really going to make anyone who's saying the Lightning should hold on to some of their top picks feel better, because these examples are the complete other end of the spectrum. But I'm bringing them up for a reason, because it kind of backs up what you were saying. Arizona, now Utah, but especially when it was Arizona, Buffalo. We use those 2 teams as an example. Mm-hmm. How many draft picks have they accumulated through the years, like recent years? A lot. And prospects.
Right.
Maybe they've traded, because they've been sellers, right? So they're trading NHLers. They're on the other end. They're getting the first-round picks. They're getting the prospects. And I think a couple of things have happened. First of all, you can have too many draft picks because you only have so many open slots on your NHL team.
Sure.
Right? I mean, you can only have so many chefs in the kitchen, right? Maybe that's a bad example, but like at some point you're going to run out of spaces to fit all of these players into your organization. Like if you have in a 7-round draft, what if you have like 12 picks and you're doing that year after year after year after year, and you use those picks and you take players, where are you going to fit them all? How many of them are going to evolve? So that's part of it. The other part is when you have a roster filled with young, talented, but young prospects, you may be missing some of the leadership that comes from non-prospects. And I was thinking about, like, what has been the difference for Ottawa this year? Because I think Ottawa and Buffalo have kind of been following a similar trajectory in that, like, they've had some high picks. They have some good young players. Both teams do. Sabres have some really good young players. Tage Thompson, Dylan Cousins, Dahlin, who's now not young anymore, but still a number 1 overall pick, Owen Power. Like, they have the Jack Quinn. He was a top 8 pick. What Ottawa did, one of the things that Ottawa did, was bringing Claude Giroux. Now, it's not like Claude Giroux arrived and then all of a sudden the Senators took off, but I think the Senators have benefited from having a Claude Giroux.
Yeah.
Like, just,
I would agree.
He's been through the paces. He's seen everything you can see. He's played in a Stanley Cup final. I think he was with the Flyers when they played in the Stanley Cup final in 2010. You know, great leader, loves being there, you know, from the area, a mentor to the younger players, can settle things down when things start going off the rails. Remember those 2 games the Lightning had against Ottawa at home?
Yeah.
I mean, after those 2 games, I'm like, Claude Giroux was one of their 2 best players. They had some injuries, but like, he can play. Buffalo may be missing some of that. And I'm not picking on them. I'm just saying, like, when all you have are the younger hotshot prospects, it may not be the right mix. And I do believe you could have too many of those picks. You probably have a suitable amount that you want to mix with the veteran guys who can serve a leadership role and the players that maybe were higher picks or have evolved into top players who are now in the prime of their career. That's the mix.
Sure.
So what the Lightning have been able to do is they have the veterans, and sometimes they're bringing in veterans to help in that regard. They have their core that's in the prime of the career, and then they've been able to turn back the clock a little bit by bringing in players who are not just drafted.
Sure.
But they're closer to their draft year, but they've gotten some experience under their belt, and they're at the beginning of their NHL career. That's been the Lightning's formula, and they've been able to do it in the absence of a lot of first-round picks. But for those fans who are like, oh my gosh, first-round picks, we don't have any. Like, the Lightning do have a second-round pick this year, and to the best of my knowledge, they have their second-round picks in the 2 years that are coming up after that. Jared's nodding. And they did get for what it's worth, a 5th-round pick back in this trade. Was that a 2026 5th-round pick? Yeah.
Come on, Jared.
Yeah. So that's not this summer. It's the next summer. So, look, I mean, the Lightning are going to draft players. Some of them are going to work out. Some of them aren't. But they have other ways of getting players. Like Nick Perbix has worked out as a draft pick.
Yeah.
Max Crozier has worked out as a draft pick.
Yeah.
I mean, Dylan Duke is in the NHL for a couple of games this year. That has worked out to this point as a draft pick. We'll see what happens with Isaac Howard. But the Lightning have a slew of other guys. Gage Gonsalves, great example. Lightning have a slew of other guys that they themselves did not draft, but they got them still near the beginning of their careers.
It's all valid, and there's different ways to build a winner, and the Lightning have found their formula. You got to hit on your stars, and you got to get them young enough and locked in to where you can keep this window open to give yourself a fighting chance. And the Lightning, as I said before, you have Hall of Famers at every position. Forward, defenseman, goaltending.
Mm-hmm.
That gives you an edge over a lot of teams. Now you got to fill the rest in. And that's what we've seen them able to do over the last 6, 7, 8 years. Seth on YouTube says, Julian stated he wants to extend Gourde. What do you think the term in AAV would be?
I don't know, Seth.
3 years, 2.5.
Well, I mean, that would be a substantial pay cut for Yanni.
That's what I would give you. But I think that's what it would take to stay here.
Yeah, I think Yanni would be interested in working with the team, but the cap is going up next year, and the Lightning don't have, now they've added the Bjorkstrand contract. Right. But, I mean, they're still in a position to add a player, to add salary, because their main guys are all locked up, and other than Victor Hedman, who's getting a very, very small bump.
Yeah.
I mean, his new contract kicks in next year, so it's a slight increase. It's not substantial, right? So really, at this point, other than the guys that they're not going to bring back or move on or decide not to re-sign, I mean, they may walk away from some restricted guys too. We'll see. The Lightning do not have any player other than Oliver Bjorkstrand, who's on the salary for this year. But prior to them adding Bjorkstrand, they don't have anybody who's getting a pay raise next year. And the cap is going up $7.5 million. Now, the players who leave, they're going to have to replace those players. But who are they replacing them with, right? So we'll see. You think 2 at a lower number.
Yeah, well, I think you're going to have to sacrifice, and you see this a lot with veterans. You're going to have to, I think, where you overpay is not necessarily the dollar amount. It's the term.
Yeah.
And it's what they did with Connor Sherry. I think it's something you're going to do with Yanni Gourde.
The Lightning have given out a fair number of 3-year deals, though. I mean, Gergensen's got a 3-year deal. Sherry got a 3-year deal. Glendening got a 2-year deal. I mean, we'll see. I think that's a discussion for later, though. I mean, but the fact that the cap is going up gives the Lightning a little bit of room to negotiate. And they've stated, Julian stated, it's a priority for them to try and get Yanni re-signed.
Gourde will be moving into his 3rd year removed from his last 20-goal season, which was in 2021-22 with Seattle. He had 21 that year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you want him, but you want him at your price. The cap is going up, but I don't think you break the bank on a Yanni Gourde. If you've already talked about potentially bringing him back, I think Gourde would probably say to himself, I may not get the dollar amount I want. Can you give me a little more term? And I think that's the best of both worlds. So that's how I would answer. That's how I would answer that question. At Bolts Radio, if you want to get involved in the conversation, partner. Let me get to a bit more here on X. And this would be from Basil. He had a couple of comments. This most recent.
By the way, Basil reached out to me. He said, you guys threw me under the bus. I'm like, it wasn't me. I didn't read your tweet. He had a comment that you thought was about the Columbus game. He's like, that was about the Florida game. And we kind of jumped down his throat. So sorry, Basil. I think that was the comment where he said they look tired. Was that one? I'm trying to remember his comment.
Tired. Yeah.
And we're like, I don't know about that. And he's like, no, I didn't mean the Columbus game. I meant the Florida game. Gotcha. Although, honestly, Basil, I'm not sure that they looked, quote unquote, tired in the Florida game either. But
don't take offense.
Just wanted to make things right with our loyal listener and contributor, Basil.
He said, losing Asimon is a small price to pay. Fun hustle guy. I didn't like him initially, but he came to appreciate him as a rare 4th liner who can actually carry the puck and create shot opportunities. Seldom produce goals, but often exerted pressure.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah,
when the line of Asimon, Glendening, and Gergensons was put together, they gave the Lightning some good minutes over an extended period of time in the middle part of the season. And I think Asimon was the guy driving play on that line because of his ability to hold on to the puck, and he could skate.
Yeah, he could dangle a little bit. I think his only downfall was, if he wanted a bigger role, you probably weren't going to get it here with Tampa Bay, and he took too many penalties.
Yeah.
And for somebody who was in that 3rd, 4th line role, you can't do that. But I don't think that's why he was moved on from. Lucas, my neighbor, says, I will not be shocked when the starting lineup is announced and the new Gourde line gets the call first. Good thing Dave wears headphones in the booth because the fans are about to blow the roof off when Yanni's name is announced by Paul Porter.
The Lightning have had a lot of popular players during this run of excellence. And, I mean, look, if you win and you win championships, you're going to have a lot of popular players. Yanni might not be the most popular, like the favorite player of the most people.
Yeah.
But I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a lot of players more popular than Yanni. I'll put it that way. He has been one of the most popular players the Lightning have had in the last decade. Based on where he came from, he had to spend some time in the ECHL.
Yeah.
Had to scratch and claw his way up the ranks, and then made the NHL and had such a huge impact
Right.
on the Lightning doing well and ultimately winning cups.
And let's face it, the post celebration with the shirt off and the running around that all play. It's why I think so many people were loving Nikita Kucherov afterwards because of that. I think they become a little more human. When you see them in that.
And
setting.
it wasn't only that he was part of that checking line with Coleman and Goudreau. I mean, which he was, and they were a big pain in the rear end for the other team to play against. Who scored the only goal in Game 7 against the Islanders in 2021, shorthanded, in a 1-0 Lightning win. I mean, it doesn't quite go with, to me, the Cirelli goal that eliminated the Islanders in the bubble. Granted, that wasn't a Game 7, but that was overtime.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that Yanni Gourde goal in Game 7 the next year, one of the biggest goals the Lightning got in their 2-year run in going back-to-back.
Here's a trivia question. Out of all of the players who've won recent cups with the Lightning and got a tribute video, how many are now back playing for the team? McDonough
and Gourde.
Is it McDonough and Gourde, right?
Yeah.
Bogosian
was back, yeah.
All right, I like
He's
it.
been there. He was gone. He was back.
Do you think Ben Pierce will put that in the game notes? And if he does, will he give us credit?
I saw a like an LED board, kind of like the one behind me here, but they have one in like the Lightning offices that have different messages, and they had March birthdays. You know, it was a birthday in March. Ben Pierce.
Does he?
It's not today.
Okay.
It didn't list his age either, but I think I heard him say with the gallbladder
26,
issue.
27,
Yeah,
maybe?
he's like late 20s.
Yeah. Good to be
He's
young.
a young pup.
Good to be young.
Yeah.
Anthony says, fine job by Julian. A little bit of an overpay, but we got the players, and we didn't lose big prospects. I hated Janot and Nemestikov deals, but good feeling about this one. I even texted you guys about Bjorkstrand a month ago. If Gourde isn't 100%, they need to sit him, in my opinion.
Well, I think he is 100%.
Yeah.
But they can make that determination. Jared sent us a question from Dusty the Dog.
Dusty the Dog.
Yes, Dusty the Dog asks, I've always wondered about who pays for the new players in a trade to get here. Do the Bolts pay? Do we send a private jet? Do they
It's
fly
a great
commercial?
question. I love those little questions.
Or is it up to the players to make the arrangements? Also, is that Stella in the Advent commercial? I have not seen the Advent commercial. I can assure you it is not Stella. At least if she is moonlighting in some commercial, I'm unaware of it. And if she leaves the house, she's usually with me. So the answer is no to the last part. The team that acquires the players is responsible for getting the players to their new destination. They do not make the players pay their own ticket.
Yeah.
Usually it is a commercial flight, and in the case of Bjorkstrand and Gourde, I guess that they heard early that they were going to be traded because the team was taking a charter to Nashville for a game tonight. So they were left behind knowing that they were not going to be playing for Seattle in Nashville. And then they had about a 3-hour window waiting, and then they found out where their destination was. It was going to be Tampa, and so they got a commercial flight, which was left late. I mean, I think it was, Bjorkstrand said it was, what was it, like maybe 4 o'clock Pacific time, which is 7 o'clock Eastern, and then they had to, fly about as far as you can fly across the United States. And so they got in late last night, but they're going to be ready to play tonight.
They'll be ready to go.
Every team has a team services person for the Lightning. That's Ryan Bellick, who kind of handles a lot of the travel. Liz Koharski is also involved, I think, in some of that, usually more like if there's a visa question, a player who's been playing in Canada has to come to the U.S. There are some kind of ducks to put in a row there. But generally it's Ryan who is, to the best of my knowledge, that's part of his job in that member services role to help make it seamless for the players. And I mean, just arriving is only the beginning of it. Like, what about the stuff that they left behind? Families, both of them have families, like coordinating all of that. They try and make it as easy as possible so the players don't have to worry about that. They can just go out and play. And yeah, so that's how that all plays out.
A lot of moving parts. That would actually be an interesting documentary to watch have the film on the player who's traded, but everything that goes on behind the scenes, the family, to your point. Where are you staying? A lot of times they put them up in a hotel, until they really get settled. And if it's something that is longer term, then they can figure that out.
He asked about the private jet. Usually it's commercial. And again, because I'm not hearing this all the time, but I do know of one example when a private jet was sent to pick up the player, and that was when Ray Bourque was traded from the Bruins to the Avalanche in, I think, 2000. And the Avs sent a jet to get Ray Bourque, and the other guy who was involved in that trade going from Boston to Colorado was Dave Andreychuk. So Andreychuk has told this story.
That's pretty cool.
I got to hitch a ride on Ray Bourque's jet, basically, because I was in the trade too.
Yeah.
So next time we have Andy on, we'll have to have him share that story.
That's a good story. That's a really good
That's
story.
the exception, though, rather than the rule.
Yeah.
It was Ray Bourque. So
That's Ray Bourque.
Yeah.
That's right. Thomas from Lutz, the trade is interesting in that if you look at the four centers you could have, Point, Cirelli, Paul, Gourde, gives you a lot of flexibility.
He's not including Glendening, who is the best face-off guy the Lightning have.
Yes.
So right now, ultimately, we're really looking at Paul as the centerman who's going to be playing wing. But they may shift that up. We'll see. We'll also see if the Lightning, they went away from 11-7 in the game the other night against Columbus with Atkinson coming in, and it looks like tonight they're going to stay with 12-6. Maybe they do 12-6 more now with the two guys they added. But I will point this out, Greg. Be interesting to watch. The Lightning only have 12 NHL forwards right now because they added Gourde and Bjorkstrand, but they traded AC Mont, and Atkinson got assigned to Syracuse. So before the trade, they were at 12. They're actually at 11 because technically they sent Atkinson down to free up a little cap space. But if we go back 48 hours, they had 12 forwards. After this move, they still have 12 forwards, even though they added 2 forwards. So still not a lot of extra guys on the roster. You have one extra. And the other night it was Nick Perbix, who was
You could go
scratched.
11-7 if you wanted to.
You could go 11-7.
And we've seen that.
And
So
Julian alluded to the fact that Logan Brown, who was signed to an NHL deal and then sent through waivers and assigned to Syracuse, even though he's been in Syracuse, like they may call up Brown. They may call Atkinson back up. We'll see.
Al says there are 2 ways to look at what Julian might do on defense. Try for a depth D steal or do nothing, which means he's confident there's enough depth in the organization. Having some cap space available after the trade deadline would allow for additional roster players if needed.
Yeah, I think they have about 800,000. And again, the longer you go without adding money, that amount actually goes up because that 800,000 is prorated for the year.
Yeah.
Right. So, look, if you have injuries, your options are either to have the room to add a player or play short. If you don't have the room, you can't put a player on long-term injury to get the relief. So there's not a lot of room left. We'll see how the Lightning handle it. But he didn't say we're definitely done. So it's possible they could make another move. For any additional move, though, it's probably going to be dollars in, dollars out. Mm-hmm. But it wouldn't be a big swing, I wouldn't think.
Let's see. Jay, on paper, it's definitely an overpay, but it does help the current team. Need to win another cup with this group, or otherwise it's pointless, in my honest opinion. Bjorkstrand is very good against the Lightning. Hopefully he's very good for the Lightning. I have a hard time. Listen, I want people to understand there is a contradiction when you say it's an overpay, but we all acknowledge draft picks are pretty risky once you get beyond the 10th pick in the first round. We've just debated and had conversations about even first-round picks in the NHL are not a slam dunk. And you give up a couple of first-round picks, you get 2 NHL-ready players who you're probably going to have with some term. How's it an overpay?
Yeah.
Based off of what? We just talked about first-round picks and how shaky they are, particularly in this sport. I disagree wholeheartedly with that notion. Haven't we learned? Have we not learned with draft picks? They are what they are in the NHL. Hasn't hurt the Lightning one bit. Not going to win the cup every year in this league. It's not designed for that to happen because of the parity in the cap. But if we're going to talk about an overpay, maybe let's talk about players out, players in. I'm done with this draft pick nonsense that it's overpay because they don't mean a damn thing. They really don't. And I think we need to get off of that a little bit. I don't mean to pick on Jay because I think he's coming from a right place because I think I saw that narrative a lot.
Yeah.
I think we need to get off of that because these draft picks rarely turn into difference makers, particularly with what the Lightning are giving up. And the Lightning have come out on the better end of these draft picks. Was the Jeannot an overpay based off of everything? I think more so based on the player Jeannot became. That's the issue. Jeannot never got to that level the Lightning wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
You still going to say it was an overpay when they got Gourde? Won a cup.
Well, I don't think Jay is saying that. I think Jay is saying if they don't win the cup, it will all be for nothing. And this is to me the money quote from Julian Breezeball. Yeah. And you can agree with this. Maybe if you feel the way Jay does, you disagree. But this to me sums up Julian's mentality. This is a direct quote. We use some draft capital to add 2 good players that will help us win more games this season and beyond. Ultimately, the calculation is that trying and failing will yield less regret than failing to try. So he is acknowledging, Greg, there is no guarantee. The Lightning could make these moves and not win the Stanley Cup. Only 1 out of 32 teams gets to say we won the Stanley Cup, and only 1 out of 16 playoff teams. 15 of 16 teams that make the playoffs will fail if the ultimate goal is to win the Stanley Cup. But in his mind, trying and failing yields less regret than failing to try.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. I'm not sure if he practiced that ahead of time. That's kind of what he said when they acquired Savard, though.
Yeah,
I mean, he didn't say it quite as succinctly, and it didn't pop quite as much, but I think he said something to the effect of, like, if we had tried to win the Stanley Cup and failed in our goal, and I knew that we had failed in part because I did not go out and find a way to get David Savard, basically, I would have had a very hard time with that. So to Jay, it may not yield a Stanley Cup, but in the mind of the general manager, that doesn't mean that it's worth nothing, because there is value in trying. That is worth more to him than standing pat and maybe not giving yourself more of a chance to win a cup. I mean, there is a randomness to this. The stars have to align for you, but I think what he also said yesterday was you're more likely to be in a position to win the cup, even like factoring in the randomness and the luck and things have to fall your way. They are more likely to fall your way if you have a better team.
Sure.
And he feels they have a better team today than they did before the deadline.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We're going to talk more about this, I'm sure, tomorrow.
I know we only have a minute left, but I just want to say this about the Sabres because we haven't touched on them at all. This is a sneaky team because they're 0-3-1 in their last 4. They're going to miss the playoffs. But prior to that, they were 6-1. They've scored a lot this year. Again, their problem is they're giving up too many goals.
Sure.
But they're 12th in offense. They can score. They have hammered some teams. During their 6-1 stretch, they hammered the Rangers. They put an 8 spot up on the Rangers. They got another blowout win. Might have been over Philly. They've caught some teams. They're also coming off a bad loss to San Jose. We'll see. This is a weird time for teams that are going to miss the playoffs because some of their players may actually want to get traded. And, I mean, the trade deadline's tomorrow, so the Lightning are not seeing the Sabres after the deadline. But I'm kind of curious to see how this Buffalo team plays tonight. Because, look, we've talked about Alex Tuck. He's scoring. Tage Thompson is scoring. Dahlin is scoring. J.J. Peterka is on a 6-game point streak. I mean, they have some guys who can fill the net, and they are doing it. They are just not keeping the puck out of their own net, which has kind of been their problem for the last several years with a variety. They've had a kind of a merry-go-round of coaches recently, and right now it's Lindy Ruff, and he still hasn't been able to crack the code for them. They're still giving up too many goals, and, you know, and all of good, they're going to finish last in the division and, you know, probably last in the conference, too.
Well, we will see what happens tonight, and then we will recap everything tomorrow. Keep those questions rolling, and we always appreciate that at Bolts Radio. Partner,
We have
I'm
a
gonna see you
pre-tape
guys.
tomorrow, so get your questions in, or if you have them, you can get them in now, but you can get them in after the game. And we understand that pre-taping tomorrow might mean that there may be a deal done after we're off the air, but the trade deadline was going to go after we would be off the air if we went live anyway. So
We'll get to those questions for sure. I know there's still some pouring in, so we'll make sure we address it, and we will hopefully see a win tonight. Partner, I'll catch you down at Amalie Arena.
see you
in a little
tonight.
bit. Yep. Thanks to Steve Versnick. Thanks to Jared Johnson. Thanks to you for listening. We always appreciate you guys. At Bolts Radio is where you can check us out on X. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.